Hey everybody, welcome my blender heads to another tutorial lesson. In this one we're gonna go over the Eevee engine and make it suck a little bit less. Everybody knows if you go into cycles, right, and you go in here, it's gonna calculate the light better. But if you didn't notice, you go between cycles and Eevee, that's pretty dark. And if you're just coming to the light and then cranking it up until you get those same results, that's the wrong way to do it. So I'll leave the light the same at 150. I just got a basic scene. I used the bag of pie to drop in a little spiral staircase, dropped in a basic single light, just one little point light, and then made a box. So you guys can get your scene ready, and I threw a camera in so I can see inside the scene anytime I want. And so far, the only thing I've done is change the render and the viewport to 2048. So obviously you could go in and turn on a few things like your ambient occlusion, your bloom, if you have, something it's going to work with, screen space, reflections, and, maybe you could play around with the shadows and the cube size. And I'll bring that to 2048, maybe clean up the shadows just a little bit, and then come down to the indirect lighting. And well, now this is where we want to be, because Eevee doesn't look good until you tell it to. So I'll turn on auto bake, and you see there's a little bit of a difference there already, and it's going to auto bake the indirect lighting for us. But the thing we have to do is throw something in here it can work with. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my spiral staircase, and I'm going to hit Shift S, and I want to bring the cursor to the selected, and that should centralize it on that point for us. Now what I want to do is hit Shift A, and I'm going to go ahead and I want to drop in a light probe. I'm going to drop in an iridescent volume, and I'll just hit G and Z to kind of bring this up so it's inside. Now a couple things. Take a top view, go into wireframe. We want to get these light probes, all these little dots in the middle. These are light probes, and they're going to help us calculate what we have in here for lighting. It's going to help us calculate all that. And as I'll just kind of zoom out for perspective, you can see the larger cube here. So if I scale this all the way out, and I just happen to have a cube with a cube, so that kind of works good. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so let's go into the settings. The distance for the calculation of light, like how far do I want this light to calculate? Well, I want it to calculate inside and definitely right to the edges. So like 0.35 works good for what I've done. Actually 0.37 or so. Yeah, I want it right on the edges of the walls so it calculates everything. And now I also have a fall off, and we can increase or decrease the influence here, and I have an intensity. That's kind of like a brightness. Probably a good idea not to mess with that. Now we have a resolution, which is going to increase or decrease the amount of light probes. Now it is important to understand we don't want our light probes to be touching anything, because if we do, then we're going to get what is called, or rather what I call, light bleeding and or shadow bleeding. And if these little light probes are inside of a mesh, like halfway through or touching the mesh, then you're going to get that effect, and that's not good. And it looks like we're pretty clear here, so you just kind of check over your mesh and see how it looks to you. But definitely say just go ahead and get that right. Now I'm going to jump back over to rendered view, pop my camera up, and now I'm just going to take one last look inside here, and it looks like I've just got the origin point here. Let's double check. Yeah, it looks like it's just the origin point in the center. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to come back over to the render properties, come back down to the indirect lighting. I don't have a cube map in here because I'm not really worried about reflections right now, and that would be used to get rid of black spots on metallic objects. And we'll go over that in another video. But now I can click Bake Indirect Lighting. And what that is going to do is recalculate the lighting in the area. And since our light source is coming from over here, and it really isn't that powerful, kind of zoom in, and go ahead and click that, and you'll see what it's doing is it's now recalculating the light that it has to work with. Now, I don't have a whole lot of light here in the scene anyways, so let's just make a couple of adjustments and get an even better look at it. So I'm just going to kind of raise that up, and I can bring my light intensity up just a touch, and I'll come back over to the render, and what I did is I grabbed the indirect and brought it all the way up so I don't have to keep scrolling down. And then I'll delete the lighting catch, and one of those things you can do is come down to the iridescent size and you can turn that on. And if you turn that on and then bring up the irradiance size just a little bit, you can actually see all of the different light probes and where they're at, make sure there's no actual intersections. And when you click to bake that indirect lighting, now you'll actually be able to see each light probe as it is calculating. And so that's kind of cool, kind of fun, and you'll be able to get a good idea of what is going on inside your scene. Alright, now let's correct the lighting in here another step further and make this look really good. So come down to your ambient occlusion, which we ticked on. The normal distance is set to 0.2. It's not really good. We've got a lot of light bleeding here. It doesn't look very good. It's not really going in the right places. So let's bring this to something like 1.2, and then you can hit enter, scroll back up and delete that catch and then rebake that. And now as this thing rebakes, it's going to start acting like cycles, and it's going to start recalculating wherever those light probes are. So if you find that you have to, and you can see down here in the bottom, it's almost done calculating, and that is literally just one light, and it's now acting like a cycles render. And here's the byproduct of doing that, baking it and getting it right in Eevee. So if you go up to render and you note where I've got this set, oh my gosh, where did it go? I'm in the render properties and can't find it. There we go. So here's my sampling for the render in the viewport. It's going to be 4096, and if I just come over and now render this image, it's going to be a lot faster. So normally something like that, it would take, for me, even with a fast PC, it seems like it's taking like 5-10 minutes to render out. And so that was 4096. It was a little bit longer than I would have liked, but obviously we can still do a few more adjustments, and that looks really good. Obviously you can still expand on that and do a little bit more, but as far as getting the lighting more correct in this scene, well on the way to achieving a really nice render. And that took like 40 seconds. It's not that bad. That is opposed to not having that direct lighting baked, and then you're coming around and you're like, oh, I'll just shift D and do another one of these, and now your shadows are going to be all bled over, and you just try to make the scene nice and well lit. This is definitely the wrong way to do it, and this is the right way to do it. Also, don't forget, if you've got any of that light bleeding or shadow bleeding in the corners and they don't look nice and clean like this, then make sure to come over to that iridescent volume, enable that clipping, and then adjust the clip start appropriately to the edges of the desired area. Alright, so one final thought on this for now. You can see at the top of the inside of our mesh, it's completely dark because nothing was calculated there. So if you wanted to have the entire area to be well lit and all that light to be calculated, then you'll have to make those adjustments. And also one little warning, if you go to adjust your cube map and you've actually got the cube map set to auto bake, and if you have the auto bake feature on, the second you go to scale that on the Z, it's going to jump into an automatic bake. So if you don't want that, you want the control over it, then that's how you would do it. Thank you for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next tutorial lesson.